What about Thomism?
Do you think? Hold on. Do you think that God having distinct attributes entail composition?
God having what?
God having distinctions in His essence, like God's attributes being distinct. Do you think this entails composition?
Well, not every real distinction in the essence causes composition now, but if it's not, if there's composition between attributes, then yes. Like if the attributes
Uh,
are really distinct from each other.
okay, so we want to debate that.
Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so want to know my argument for why that's not necessary?
Go ahead.
Yeah, so my argument is that the attributes subsist in God's essence. For example, when we say A subsists in B, A is not a separate entity from B. Okay, so when you say something is a part of an entity, then what we're saying is that there's a separate existence making up that entity. For example, let's say my body, right? So basically, before I begin the example, basically my criteria for a part is basically just something which makes up something else up. Okay, so you have my leg, my hand, and etc. These make up my body, correct?
Mm-hmm.
You for example, if you have God's attribute, one sec. It's my okay. Okay, so basically, that's nothing. Even when God's attributes are distinct, they still do not necessarily have to entail composition because the attributes subsist in the essence. And as I explained before, subsistence is just when two things are not separate entities. For example, if you say Allah's attribute or sifat of kalam subsists within His essence, His sifat or attribute of kalam does not exist as a separate entity independent of the essence. It shares His same essence, and it does not have its own ontological status. It exists through God's essence. So basically, the thing is that now that they have the same essence, and God is identical to His essence. If God is identical to His essence, and the attributes share the same essence, or are inseparable from the same essence, then they can't be distinct essences making up God's essence.
You're done.
Based on the prior criteria I gave on what a part is, then they cannot make up God. Okay, and if they can't make up God, then they are parts based on the prior criteria. Non-contention?
Yeah. Okay. So what? First, I'll just start off by saying, if what you're saying is not a whole, but the parts are really distinct from each other. So then, if they're not, are they not united in the essence?
Yeah, I'm saying they subsist in the essence, meaning they are inseparable. So yes, they are like united, but that depends on how you define united.
They're really distinct and united. That's like
I
textbook
think
definition of composition.
look, my distinctions, yeah, well, for my distinctions of my distinction between the essence and the attributes are not major real distinctions. They're distinctions between, for example, the attributes and the essence. They're not major really distinct, but rather there's a middle ground. So they are not ontologically separate, but neither are they identical. That's my middle ground.
Okay, hold to major rule distinction. I don't really. What does that mean? Because I'm pretty sure that's really just a SCOTUS distinction. I don't hold the SCOTUS real distinctions. I think it's
Yeah,
still position.
Yeah, so a major real distinction is basically when X and Y are really distinct in the major sense, and this separates their existence or essence.
Mm.
Yeah, okay, so I'm telling you.
These two things will be distinct, though, are they not?
Sorry?
Are these two things not really distinct, like omnipotence and omniscience?
They account for a minor real distinction. How do you define a minor real distinction, first of all?
Well, that's minor real distinction is more of a Scotistic thing, but it says that there is a difference before it's apprehended by the intellect.
Yeah, okay, so the Scotic form of distinction, or the Scotic minor real distinction, minor real distinction. It's just the middle ground I gave before. They're not ontologically separate, neither are they identical.
They're not identical. Yeah, there's some real lack of identity prior to an active intellect. Which, if that is the case, and a composition is just the union of these really distinct things, and yes, it would. You're just denying the type of composition where two things come together to form a third. That doesn't really deny composition in general. All it does is deny
Yeah,
that
okay,
form of
so
composition. Right?
okay,
So
can
it's
I
still
are you
composition.
done?
There's still two really distinct things coming together to form a third. Thus, he would not be identical. These attributes would be different than him because he, in this case, would still be made up by those attributes. Because without those attributes are essential, are they not?
Yes, it would be essential attributes, essential and intrinsic to his essence. Yes.
If they're essential, then if he lacks one, then he's not himself. Thus, it would be parts because it makes them up.
Yeah, okay. Hold on. So, bro, okay, so do you agree to my criteria of a part? A part is just something that makes up another thing, correct? Do you agree to it?
I mean, I think that's an aspect of parts. Sure, we can just grant
Sorry?
that it is.
You agree? You agree?
I think that's an aspect of part. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. So, let's say a part, okay, let's say something lacks the aspect of not making up another thing. Would it be a part?
If it doesn't make up another thing, sure, yeah.
Okay, so then you agree to my prior criteria of all. Do you think God is identical to his essence? Like, you don't think God is nothing more than his essence, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so then, so now do you agree to that? There's a problem because if, for example, if you say God's attributes subsist in his essence, well, as I explained or extrapolated prior, subsistence is going to be ineffable and they're not their own entities and they exist. So, when A subsists in B, this means that A is hello, am I lying?
You were for a second. Yeah, you were for a
Yeah.
second. But go ahead.
Okay, so I think I was looking at the subsistence part. Yeah, so when you say A subsists in B, A is not a separate entity from B, and A exists through B's ontological status, and you cannot differentiate them in essence. So we have the Scotic distinction. One sec, let me get my internet. One sec. Okay, so like I'm just connected to my mom's phone, and like my mom's phone's kind of far away, so I just like went to it. Anyways, now the problem is that if you're gonna say God is identical, if you say God is nothing more than, if you're gonna say God is nothing more than his essence, and you say the attribute subsisting his essence, then you're not affirming two essences. You're affirming one essence and the attribute existing through the essence. So if they have the same essence, the argument is going to be that there cannot be two separate essences making up one essence. So, for example, as I gave before, Allah's kalam has the same essence as Allah, but they are still distinct. Okay, but if Allah's kalam has the same essence as him, it's not an essence making up his essence, because it's the same essence. You see what I'm getting at? So it cannot fulfill the criteria of being a part. And you agree to my criteria of what a part is. So what's your contention?
Yeah, that objection really just confuses what an essence is. Essence is the quiddity or the whatness of a thing. Thus, its essential attributes to make up the essence. If you say he has multiple essential attributes, that would make up the essence. Just because they subsist in the essence does not mean that they are not compose the essence, because they're not identical to it. So when we predicate something in the essence, we predicate it by virtue of a part in the sense, because we already got the composition. So the essence is not in existence, but it's what it's in, because a part is in a whole, but a part is not the whole. And this is like the whole. You're just missing a composition in general. So that
Okay,
would
yeah, okay. I get your point. So like you're just saying that I'm mixing up composition, but that's not the case really because we already know that a composition is just a set of parts. And also, again, if they have the same essence, then it can't be separate essences making up. So what I mean by essence in this context is basically the reality of something. So for example, the reality of the attribute of Allah's kalam is not its own reality separate from Allah. They have the same reality. Okay, so you can't make up Allah's reality with distinct attributes because even if they are distinct, they subsist within Allah, and if they subsist within Allah, they have the same essence, and if they have the same essence, they can't make up because something cannot make up itself. And as I established prior, Allah is identical to His essence. So His essence would be non-composed, and if His essence is non-composed, then He Himself is not composed. So you're not giving a valid contention.
You're saying that he can't be made up of different essences. He can. That's the whole point of composition. So you have these multiple forms which come together to form a third. So we have A and B and C. But all these three, you can say omnipotence, omniscience, omnibenevolence. All three of these come together can form a new thing. That's what we would call composition. So there can be many essences that make up one essence, and you could say this one essence is not the same. And when you say essence is the reality of something, no, essence and existence are distinct. You can't confuse the two. I don't know why I would use our language and then deviate from the meaning, which is the whatness or the quiddity.
Yeah, okay, again. Okay, so again, so see, there's a problem. So when I say reality, when I say reality, I just mean the existing things about, so like the existing oneness of the thing. Okay, so what I mean by the existing oneness of the thing is, for example, you say a car is red. Okay, so its reality would be its redness, its size, its dimensions, and etc. This is what we call its reality. Okay, so when we say the attribute, they exist through the same oneness of God, and they do not exist separate from it. Okay, so again, can you repeat the first part of your objection? Because I kind of cut off.
Yeah, the first part of what I was saying was that composition is two things coming together to form a third. So it can be multiple essences to form a new composite essence. What we're positing here, is what I'm trying to posit here. Because there's a real lack of identity prior to an active intellect, then we would have composition, right? Because these things are united and they're really distinct. They're really distinct and united in the same sense that they're really distinct. Thus, we have composition. And because of this, there's composition. And there's multiple things coming together to form a third. If there weren't multiple things, or as you would say, multiple essences, then they would be really identical. I mean, there would be an identity prior to an active intellect, but you conceded already that they are really distinct. AKA, there's a lack of identity prior to an active intellect. Thus, we say that.
Yeah, okay, so for the last point, I didn't concede, aka concede to God being, God attributes being really distinct. I already held to that. Okay, so depends on what you mean by concede. Anyway, that's irrelevant because this is just gonna end up in semantic bullshitting. So let's go with the first part. Yeah, I agree. So when we say something is composite, we mean it has multiple things that come together to make up the thing in question. But the problem is, again and again, and I have to keep telling you this because at this point we're just becoming repetitive. Your argument against my non-composition argument and the attribute subsisting in the essence, you didn't really attack anything because when we say because if they have the same essence exist through the same ontological status, then we cannot say they came together, because if you say that they came together to make up God's ontological status or ontological reality, then you're just saying that the essence composed itself, which just leads to an absurdity, and I can dismiss your argument through absurdity. So any argument you're going to make that it comes together to make up blah blah blah, when it comes together, right? You can say it comes together, but does it really come together because it's the same essence? So can the essence can the same essence just come together and make up? That makes no sense. Anyways, yeah, so the argument just falls under reduction ad absurdum, and like you can just like counter my argument right now.
I wasn't saying that the essence composes itself. That's not what I was saying. And it's not even incumbent argument.
Can I clarify something?
Let me finish. Just because they have the same subsistence does not mean the fact that they have the same. I mean, they can't come together to compose it. That's because the essence and existence are distinct, real distinction between them. Thus, you can have the substance composed, but they have to share the same act of existence. So it doesn't contradict anything that I said. And you saying they subsist and the other doesn't mean they can't come together to form it. Well, yeah, they can come together to form it. It's not. Don't confuse it for a temporal notion.
Okay, so again, another problem is just gonna be that. Okay, so when you say that's not what you said, yeah, I know that's what you said. That's the whole point of my argument. So there's gonna be a problem because now you're shifting the whole notion of my claim. My whole notion of my claim is that it's an entailment of your argument. Okay, so when I say when you say that they come together, right? If you say that together, even though they subsist, the entailment of that claim is that the attribute, not the attribute, the essence comes together within itself to make up itself. Like that makes no sense. And I'm saying that's an entailment of your claim. That's not your claim itself. It's the very entailment of it. So that's just going to be a shift in quantifier fallacy. And then we're going to go on to the next part. So can you like restate the second part again, real quick?
Yeah, just because they come together to form a thing doesn't mean they came together to conform it. I'm saying another would have to come together to conform it. That's kind of the whole point of why God has to be simple. So don't try straw man my argument. Did you ask me for?
Yeah, okay. So, again, the argument is that even if you say they don't come together, they can't come together. There's no such thing as coming together when you have the same subsistence. Because when you have the relation between A and B and they subsist, then the relation between A and B is that they exist through the same ontological status. If they exist through the same ontological status, you say that they came together. That entails a false entailment because they don't come together because it's the same ontological status. Look, let me like explain this like real like simply, okay? So like for example, you say for example the wall, and then the very okay, let's say the circle and the roundness of the circle. You don't say the circle and the roundness of the circle came together and just mixed and then they become the circle. No, because basically so when you say the circle has roundness, the round can be the aspect which encompasses the circle. It's not some type of like separate entity that came together. Like the circle and the roundness are not came together to make. Even if you don't like, I know like you're not saying they came together like temporally. I'm just saying that like they don't like they don't combine the circle. If you know what I mean. So like your argument is just going to be like false, really. Like, you don't really attack it.
It's really distinct matter coming together from around a circle. Yes, it would be. Like I don't get this notion coming from. And they could two things can be separate, have the same ontological. I'm not even talking about separation here, right? It doesn't have to be separate. Two things can come together to form a third, even with the same ontological status. We have like the hand, for example. You can cut off your hand, even though it's subsisting by you still, it's fading away. Right? You have the same your hand subsists in you, but it's still subsists in the same even now having the same ontological status. Right?
Yeah, that's not my hand does not my hand does not subsist in me. That's a very false claim. Like I don't even know how you even got to this conclusion. Okay, because when you say if you say my hand subsists in me, you know the absurdity of that claim because you're just saying that me and my hand have the same essence and my hand exists through my essence and my hand also shares the same ontological status with me and that my hand is inseparable from me. No, that's not the case. My hand has its own essence. My hand is a thing with 5 fingers, and those 5 fingers has a palm, etc., etc. It has its own set of muscles, and that doesn't relate to me, bro. Like that's not me as a whole. When you say something this, like, you don't have to, like, how many times do I have to explain it? Like, at this point, it's just getting annoying. Like, no hate to you, bro, but like, it's just getting annoying how many times you have to explain subsistence. And when you say A subsisting B, okay, A is not a separate entity. It's not its own entity. If you're saying that A, so if you're saying that my hand subsists in me, you're saying my hand is not a separate entity. Like, well, yes, my hand is separate from me, and it does exist as its own entity. Like, what do you mean my hand subsists in me, bro? Like, I don't even know where you got this claim. Did you even
Oh
understand
my
my?
goodness. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Do you know what subsistence says? Because you
Yeah,
keep
subsistence.
presupposing that when I already attacked that, and you're not listening to what I'm saying. What is subsistence?
Yeah, I already explained subsistence. Subsistence is the relation between A and B, where A exists through B's ontological status and essence, and does not exist separate from A, and A is not its own entity, like independent from B.
I mean, that's your presupposition about subsistence. Subsisting is just a sustained existence, right? So something can exist as a part of another, right? Just
But, hold
let me
on,
finish.
wife
Let me
on,
finish. Let me finish.
one
Let
second,
me finish.
one second.
Let me finish.
But there's going to be a problem if I let you finish. Let me explain something. Okay,
You have
because we
is
have two.
you can have
Hold on,
A as a part of B and A subsist in B. That doesn't mean that B subsistence is from itself, from another, or from the act of existence. What I'm saying, it's a real distinction between essence and existence. So it can exist in B. What we mean by saying that is just it exists as part of B.
oh no! There's a misunderstanding right now because I think you're using the scholastic definition of subsist or the general definition while I'm talking about Ashari Kalam and while I'm talking about Islamic theology and the Hanbali school and how they talk about subsistence and God's attributes and what subsistence means. So we're talking about two different systems of subsistence. Okay, so even okay, let's grant you that subsistence means that. Okay, sure, that's what subsistence means. Okay, but what's the point now? Because when I say God's attributes subsist in him, that has different meaning. You have to take account the meaning, the semantic value of my argument. The semantic value of my argument is just that God's attributes don't exist as their own entities. They exist through God's ontological status, and they exist through His essence, and they don't exist independent or separately from the essence. So that's what I mean when I say subsist. Yeah, okay, you might have your own definition, but you have to take account the meaning of my argument.
I'm not saying that they exist as their own entity insofar as they have their own active existence. No, that's not what I'm saying. They are separate in the fact of their identity or their essence, right? Two things can come together and form a third. These are distinct essences coming together to form one essence. So that's what I mean in the analogy, two things coming together to form a third. Like we have metal shaped in a certain way, forms a car, right? These metal, which has a different identity than a car, comes together, and then we have the rubber of the tire to form a car, right? They go there's so because of that, we can apply that to a law, the nature of composite things, right? So the subsistence is the act of existence, right? The act of existence is separate from the essence, not separate, distinct. My fault. Is distinct from the essence. There's a lack of identity. It doesn't mean separation.
Okay, but
So
hold
if
on, I'm
there's
not
a
saying that.
lack of identity, then in the subsistence laws in the act of existence, then the essence, we can say the essence is composed or has many things. As you can see, there's really, well, I wouldn't say can see because you don't like that word, but as you said, there are really distinct parts. Because these parts are really distinct, even though they exist by the same act of existence, that doesn't mean they don't come together to form a third thing. I'm not implying separation at all. What I'm telling you is that your semantics are impossible, so I don't know why you keep coming in and saying, well, this is my semantics. Well, I don't care if it's your semantics. Guess exactly what I'm refuting. And you're not giving a logical argument against it. Sure,
Yeah,
they're sustained by the same thing. Just because they're sustained by the same thing does not mean that they are the same. Or there's no
yeah, okay, so
contradiction.
Yeah, okay. So when I was talking about my semantics, you were saying that's not what subsistence is. I'm just addressing that point when you say that's not what subsistence is. I'm saying that I'm talking about different semantic system, how it defines subsistence. That's irrelevant anyways. Anyways, let's just talk about my argument. Sure, that's fine. Okay, my argument, so the reason, like, when you say that they came together just because they're really distant. Okay, so when your argument basically, when you're giving contention to an argument, the problem is that you're presupposing the notion that distinction must entail a part, and you know, like right now you still don't justify this. You're just giving me examples of physical components. Yeah, like do you know even like how ridiculous that is? Because but based on your logic, like we can say that like X cannot occur because of this notion B, but I never justify the notion B. Brother, like bro, you're just giving me the notion that if something's really distinct then it's a part. I didn't concede that they're really distinct parts. I just said that they are really distinct, but I didn't say they are really distinct parts. Like you just added the part, I think. And also, I would like you to justify your framework or methodological framework that a part or that a distinction entails a part. My bad. So like you need to justify those two things. Also, I'm not saying that they're sustained. I'm just saying that they exist through the same ontological status. Like, brother, like look, like just listen to me. When you say something exists through the same ontological status, you're saying that they share the same ontological status by existing through it. You don't. Okay, so when you say God's attributes, and okay, so for example, if you see Allah's attributes, and then like there's Allah, you don't count two entities. Oh, brother, look. Well, there's Allah's attribute of Kalam entity one, and then there's Allah entity two. That's not how it works. That's the point of subsistence. And again, I'm just saying that they have the same ontological reality, or they have the same subsisting relation, and because of this, they have the same ontological reality. If they have the same ontological reality, you can't say combine, you can't say make up, because then you're saying the essence makes or combines or makes up itself. That's why I'm using the subsistence argument and why it does not entail composition. You've just been repeating the same argument again and again and again. Oh, they're this thing, they're this thing, they're this thing, they're this thing. Please justify that something being distinct entails its apart, because you never justified this, nor have you directly countered my argument about the subsistence point. You're just giving me your own semantics of subsistence. Like, and then like you're just saying, and then like you're trying to refute my argument by saying, yeah, just because they're sustained by the same thing, okay, but I'm not saying they're sustained by the same thing. Like now you're just like shifting the semantics of my claim. Yeah, you can like give your contentions now. Hey, we can conclude it if you want.
You literally did say they subsist by the same thing, or they have the same ontological status, or they have the same entity. That's literally was your own claim. So I did repeat what you said, and if you're saying I'm just repeating myself, it's because gave this contention. You just wasn't listening, which is why I didn't understand it. But what I'm saying is a union of really distinct parts. Of really distinct things is a part. Would constitute a part formally. Right, because when we have two things united, insofar as they're really distinct and they form anything, the same way if we have omnipotence and omniscience, right? These two things come together. They're not the same. Once they're united, they're not the same. They're something different.
Oh my gosh, dude. Like, yeah, I know there's something different. Look, should we just conclude and like we can just like give it one sec. Whyfun. We can just give our conclusions on why we think we won, and then like don't counter anything else. Just tell me why you think you won, and then I'll tell why I think I won, and then we can go. Are you fine with that, or just want to like continue?
I'm fine with that. Okay.
So should I start off with my conclusion, or should you start off?
Also,
I bet.
Yeah, my conclusion is just by him conceding that, what's it called? Like omnipotence, for example, when they come together, they're not the same thing. By virtue of him agreeing to that, the whole thing that I was arguing was boom, it's a part, because that new thing are the fruit of these two things coming together. Thus, by our semantics, it would be a part. By the other semantics we just agreed with, which was A part is something which makes up another thing. So one thing this thing is made up of is number of definitions. Thus, we have parts. Thus, the union of really distinct things is composition. As he conceded, or as he agreed to, the parts are really, the attributes are really distinct, but they're united in the essence. Thus, they are parts. Thus, the essence is composed or made up of. So it's these two things which make up a third thing, which would be Allah. I don't know all those attributes that he's going to posit, but all these attributes come together to form Allah. So I'm saying, since essence and existence are distinct, then his essence is composed, but they can share the same existence. And he was saying, his whole argument, well, then you would have to say it composes itself. No, we both could agree that you can't compose yourself, but that's the whole argument we're arguing. That's why God has to be simple, because if not, then you have to have A, something composing itself, which is absurd, or B, something that's not composite. This is why the Thomists posit divine simplicity. So he kind of missed the whole point, presupposing his stuff, and all of my arguments just came from logical conclusion. One more thing, he argued that I just said semantics. No, I literally just implied sustaining. We can refer to two different things by the same word. I don't have to argue definitions because definitions are not propositional. So when I say subsistence, I just refer to remaining in existence. So we can. That's what I want.
Like, you done?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, so just to give my conclusion, my first argument was that if A subsists in B, then they have the same ontological status, and they exist through the essence, or A exists through the essence of B, and they're not separate entities, they are the same entity. Okay, so basically, this is the first proposition I gave. Then the second proposition was that when you say, okay, so for the second proposition is that when you say X is a part of Y, you're saying X makes up Y with with other parts. Okay, so he agreed to this criteria of a part, so he agreed to concede to this criteria of a part. Then, when he said that his whole point of the argument is that it can't compose itself, so you must have something that composes itself, or it's identical, or it's non-composite. And my point is, again, that this presupposes that distinction must entail a part. Still, he justify, he just gives some examples, he didn't even suffice how these examples even really work, or even justify the burden of proof. Anyways, now, when you say the attributes subsist, then this will entail that God and his attributes have the same ontological status or reality. If they have the same ontological status, then they cannot be different ontological statuses, making up God's ontological status because they share the same ontological status. And if you're going to still say this is entailing composition, then you're just saying God is composing himself because God is identical to his ontology or essence. If they have the same essence, if the attribute and God have the same essence, and you say that the attributes make up God's essence, then you're saying that God is making up himself. And this entails some kind of absurdity. Yeah, I know his argument is that, but his argument doesn't apply because my whole point of my argument was that you cannot say something composes itself. So you must concede that my subsistence argument shows that God is non-composite while having distinct attributes. And for the semantic thing, yeah, so again, I'm talking about Ash'ari Kalam and Islamic theology. You're talking about scholastics and philosophy in general. Yeah, so we're referring to different things. And that's still relevant because we cleared up these semantic issues later. Anyways, God today, man. May God guide you to Islam. I'll see you later, bro.